You're here for the deep dive, where we try to make complex issues clear and fast. Today, we are digging into potential U.S. strategies towards Russia, particularly with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
Right. We've been looking at recent international reporting.
And the big question seems to be pressure or engagement. Which path will the U.S. take?
Exactly. And the reports lay out a few distinct possibilities, each with, pretty significant consequences. It's about understanding the tools the U.S. might use.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this. There's been talk about the current U.S. president being, well, quite unhappy with Putin.
Specifically mentioning doubts about Zelensky's legitimacy as a complicating factor for any talks.
Right, and that seems to lead into discussions about potential secondary tariffs on Russian oil. If a deal isn't reached and Russia's seen as responsible.
Okay, so secondary sanctions, what does that actually mean for, say, countries still trading with Russia?
Well, think of it like this. Instead of punishing Russia directly, you target the countries buying their stuff, like oil.
So the report suggests these buyers could be banned from doing business in the U.S.
That's the potential stick, yeah. It makes buying Russian oil risky for other nations, indirectly cutting off Russia's money.
So big buyers like China and India, who've stepped in since Western sanctions started, they could face U.S. restrictions if they keep buying.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And the tariff range mentioned is pretty steep, like 25% to 50%. That would definitely make buyers think twice.
And this builds on existing sanctions, right, from the U.S., UK, EU?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
But China and India buying has, softened the blow for Russia. So these secondary tariffs are about dialing up that pressure again.
It's about hitting their revenue. Reports suggest Russia pulls in maybe $500 million a day from oil exports.
Yeah, and their planned daily expenses are around $400 million.
Right.
So there's currently a cushion. Squeezing that oil money could really impact their ability to fund, well, everything, including the military.
Okay, and then there's the whole shadow fleet issue, these tankers trying to get around the price cap.
Right, that's another angle mentioned in the reports. Tightening the screws on those tankers. The U.S. has sanctioned, 39?
39. The UK's done 73, and the EU's sanctioned even more. It seems like a coordinated effort to close those loopholes.
But it's tough, right? These tankers are deliberately obscure.
Oh, absolutely. It's a real cat and mouse game. They change flags, ownership structures. It's designed to evade sanctions. So the impact of sanctioning X number of ships is still debated.
This fits with what analysts like Benjamin Schmidt from UPenn are saying. He emphasizes hitting Russia's energy income hard.
Yeah, he sees it as the Kremlin's main funding source. His argument is basically you have to reduce that revenue stream significantly to potentially shorten the conflict and stop doing things that might weaken Ukraine's position.
But Schmidt also adds a wrinkle, doesn't he? About direct U.S. tariffs on Russia.
He does. He points out that direct U.S.-Russia trade is already, way down at a 20-year low.
So slapping more direct tariffs on Russia wouldn't have much bite at this point.
Probably not a huge impact, given how little they're trading directly anyway. That's why the focus shifts to these secondary sanctions and the shadow fleet hitting the network that enables the oil flow.
Got it. It's about adapting the strategy because the economic landscape has changed.
Precisely. Okay, so that's the pressure angle, mostly sanctions. What's the alternative?
Well, another major path discussed is actually increasing aid to Ukraine. More military support.
The logic being?
The idea is if Ukraine is stronger on the battlefield, they have more leverage in any potential negotiations. It could incentivize Russia to make concessions.
Makes sense. Doug Klain at the Atlantic Council seems to back this. He argues new sanctions need strict enforcement, but also need to be paired with more military aid.
He sees the battlefield situation as key.
Yeah, paramount, he says. Maybe even more decisive than just economic pressure alone in bringing the conflict towards a resolution.
Okay, but there's a counter-argument, right? From Nicholas Gvozdev.
Gvozdev from the American Foreign Policy Institute raises doubts about whether more aid is actually likely.
Why the doubt?
He points to reports suggesting a, let's say, strained relationship between Zelensky and the current U.S. president, and past difficulties in agreements like some mineral resources deal. It adds a layer of diplomatic uncertainty.
So Gvozdev thinks the current administration might be hesitant to significantly ramp up aid.
That seems to be his read. He even suggests that criticizing Ukraine might be seen, maybe cynically, as a way for Trump to score points with the Kremlin. It highlights how complex the internal U.S. political dynamics are in this.
Okay, so pressure through sanctions, support through aid. What's the third option the reports mention?
The third option is actually lifting some sanctions.
A move the Kremlin would obviously favor.
Absolutely. They've reportedly even tied it to conditions for, say, a Black Sea ceasefire demanding sanctions on Ras Al-Khaimah be removed and SWIFT access restored.
Right, SWIFT being that crucial global banking messaging system.
Exactly. Getting cut off hurts, so getting back in would be a big deal for them. And Trump has mentioned possibly lifting sanctions before.
And there was that Bloomberg report suggesting the administration was weighing options like targeted easing for oil producers to maybe encourage talks.
Yeah, alongside the possibility of massively expanding sanctions. So kind of keeping both options open, it seems.
But lifting sanctions unilaterally, that carries risks, doesn't it?
Mm.
Especially with allies.
Huge risks. The reports highlight this. It could weaken leverage, particularly regarding those frozen Russian assets, most of which are held in Europe, not the U.S.
So if the U.S. acts alone, it could fracture the allied front.
It could. And even if the U.S. lifted sanctions, the EU might just keep theirs in place, especially on trade and fuel. That would limit the actual benefit for Russia significantly.
Okay, that covers the economic levers.
Yeah.
What about the purely diplomatic side? Engagement versus isolation.
Well, the report suggests Moscow thinks it's getting signals of potential engagement from the current administration, a contrast to the more isolationist approach previously.
So a potential shift in tone, at least.
Potentially. Gvozdov's analysis suggests Trump seemed interested in maybe de-emphasizing Ukraine in talks, looking for common ground elsewhere.
Like where?
Areas like the Middle East, the Arctic, maybe energy and mineral extraction, kind of a more transactional approach, perhaps.
But the alternative is still on the table, maintaining or even increasing Russia's isolation.
Yes. And one interesting idea mentioned from Thomas Graham at Yale is trying to use dialogue with China to persuade Beijing to reduce its support for Moscow.
Bringing China into the equation. That sounds complicated.
Very. It acknowledges China's crucial role in propping up Russia's economy and international position. Trying to influence Beijing would be a delicate, multifaceted diplomatic effort, but it shows the interconnectedness of it all.
Okay, so to sort of wrap this up for everyone listening, we've looked at several potential U.S. strategies towards Russia based on recent reporting.
Right. There's the path of increased sanctions, especially secondary ones on oil and targeting the shadow fleet.
There's the option of significantly boosting military and other aid to Ukraine to strengthen their position.
Then there's the possibility of selectively lifting some sanctions, perhaps as a negotiating tactic, though that comes with risks regarding allies.
And finally, the diplomatic track ranging from potential engagement on specific issues to maintaining or increasing international isolation, possibly by working through China.
And it's crucial to remember these are all potential strategies. What actually happens depends on, a whole host of decisions and events still unfolding.
Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear. New episodes every day.